This video contains elements that are not suitable for children under the age of 14. Viewer discretion is advised.
2005 marked the 60th anniversary of Thomas and Friends. To celebrate the occasion, Hit Entertainment produced an hour-long special, The First of 13, Calling All Engines. In between the story about the rivalry between the steam engines and the diesels during the construction of the Soda Airport were some interactive segments and a few songs sprinkled in. Honestly, they didn't add anything to the overall story. If you cut them out, the special would probably run at about 30 minutes, thereby making it an extended episode. Calling All Engines marked the returns of characters like Rusty, Lady, Daisy, Derek, and Diesel 10 into the series, but with the exception of Rusty, none of them would appear in Series 9. Lady and Derek haven't appeared since. Diesel 10 wouldn't play a major role for a special for 6 years, though he was mentioned in the Series 10 song Strength, and Daisy had to wait another 10 years before she actually got another starring role. The biggest shakeup in Calling All Engines was the rebuilding of Tidmouth Sheds from 6 berths to 7, thereby making Emily a permanent resident. Did it make much of a difference in the show? Well, no, not really. But it did mark the implication for 13 years that she and Engines 1 through 6 were the only real permanent residents at Tidmouth, as if they, along with Toby, were the leaders of the railway and the only engines that actually mattered. Series 17 to 21 did attempt to rectify this, as did Series 22 to some extent, by putting more focus on the side characters, and yet the Steam Team name lingered and would continue to do so to this day. As I mentioned earlier, Rusty made a return to the show with the remainder of the Skarloey 6. Except for Sir Handel, who wouldn't turn up until the following series. In the original American dub for Series 9, after being referred to as gender neutral for Series 4 through 7, Rusty was referred to as female for the episodes Toonville Toots and Duncan in the Old Mine, yet for later releases on DVD, and for Series 10 onwards, Rusty was reverted back to male per the Railway series.
Rusty's favorite journey was by the lake. She liked to toot her horn there. The sound echoed around the hills. Rusty's horn was special. Rusty was coming down the hill with freight cars full of coal. She stopped when she saw Duncan. "Oh, look what you've done, Duncan," she hooted. "Why did you break through the barrier?" "I wanted an adventure," Duncan wished quietly. Rusty's favorite journey was by the lake. He liked to toot his horn there. The sound echoed around the hills. Rusty's horn was special. Rusty was coming down the hill with freight cars full of coal. He stopped when he saw Duncan. "Look what you've done, Duncan," he hooted. "Why did you break through the barrier?" "I wanted an adventure," Duncan wished quietly.
Yeah, that was pretty weird, wasn't it, folks? But that being said, did Hit Entertainment make the unintended implication of Rusty being the show's first transgender character? Regardless, having old favorites like the Skarloey 6, or rather 5 at this point, return to the show would be a good thing. Unfortunately, though, their personalities ended up leaving a lot to be desired, especially Skarloey and Rheneas.
Zack, I hope it's not too much trouble, but can I take the reins here for a moment, please?
Sure, I was actually hoping you would.
Thank you. Okay, have the writers decided to just focus on the flashbacks of very old engines riding out Rheneas and the Dinosaur and Skarloey the Brave this season? Actually, I don't think they paid attention to them at all, because Skarloey and Rheneas were a lot more mature in those flashbacks than these 2 episodes. I know Skarloey and Rheneas may look quite young, even in the earlier seasons when they were actually portrayed properly, but they should be the wise mentor figures the young engines look up to, not childish brats. To make this worse, the former of the 2 was implied to have happened because of a quick line in Emily Saves the World from season 18.
Really? Well, once I had to deliver a great big dinosaur skeleton.
I know Rheneas and Skarloey are hard to distinguish as individuals because of their personalities being similar in the present day, but them being written the way they were in those 2 episodes is not the way to do it. This is why I don't mind Rheneas' personality in Blue Mountain Mystery. He's not written too badly here, and he and Skarloey are easily able to be told apart from something other than the way they look.
As much as I agree with Rachel about how badly written Skarloey and Rheneas were, I have one little complaint to address. You wouldn't let me talk about Emily's persona in the last series, and yet you let Rachel talk about Skarloey and Rheneas for this series? What the actual hell?
Oh, back off, Matt. Unless you want to end up like Bishop Brennan.
He did kick me up the ass!
Anyway, in order to interact with the narrow gauge engines, a large-scale model for Thomas, known as Gauge Free, was built. A similar-sized model was built for the Pack spinoff, Gauge 3.5, and had been built during the production of Series 5, mainly used for close-up shots like the music videos for Night Train and 5 new engines in the shed. Percy was also made in Gauge 3.5 for the Pack series, as was James in Gauge Free for Series 10, but we'll get to that next time. While I can understand wanting to save time for making someone like Gordon or Henry, Thomas felt blatantly shoehorned into the Skarloey stories, the worst offender being a random cameo in Skarloey the Brave. Like, what was the point of that? This ended up making Series 9 the first in which Thomas appeared in at least one shot in every episode. Alongside the reintroduction of the narrow gauge engines was the introduction of Mr. Percival, serving as an XP to the Thing controller from the Railway series. Why he wasn't introduced with them back in Series 4, I'll never understand. But with that said, it was one of the better changes that Hit Entertainment made for the show, establishing a different controller for a different railway system that wasn't the Northwestern. It does add a touch of realism to the series, instead of simply making Sir Topham Hatt some kind of almighty master of the Sodor universe. Series 9 was the first since the Hit Entertainment takeover to introduce new characters after not doing so for Series 8. How did I hold up after 15 years? Well, I'd like to start by saying Neville was very much a waste of money, despite the Q1 being a fascinating engine. He had only 3 lines in his debut story.
"Hello," puffed Neville cheerfully. "Hello," said Neville happily. "Thank you," whistled Neville.
And he was basically a plot device, and as showed when Neville appeared in 2 episodes after that, one each for Series 11 and 12, and was never seen again. Even Hugo had more of a personality than that, and I'll get to him soon enough. Unless they decide to bring Neville back, I don't see him making a return to the show anytime soon. Next, there's Molly the Yellow Engine, and I just want to get this out of the way. No, Rebecca is not a clone of Molly. Just because she's a Yellow Tender Engine does not mean they're one and the same. That's like saying Bill and Ben are clones of Donald and Douglas just because they're twins, or saying that Theo is a clone of Fergus because they're both railway traction engines. If you want your character to be a clone, you have to copy at least a majority of the previously established character. Rebecca is a cheerful, somewhat naive ray of sunshine, while Molly is just there with not much in terms of personality. Of course, Molly is considered to be more popular than Rebecca, so there's that. And you know what? This is probably the point in which the show's problem with female characters started to make itself obvious. Barring Emily, who is one of the main characters, although not written very well depending on who you ask, most of the female characters just got shunted to the side after one episode, and if they're lucky, make background cameos afterward. Maybe a small speaking part if they're really lucky. Molly got 2 in Series 11.
"I thought you were collecting trucks of presents," chuffed Molly.
Be careful, Thomas, Molly tooted. The wind is filling the boat's sails.
And after appearing in The Great Discovery, she was never seen again. Would I want her to return? Well, I had some attachment to her back in my teens, though since then, my interest in her has waned, mostly due to far more interesting newbies appearing in the series since. But I still believe that if done justice, Molly would have made a fine addition to the show. Thirdly, there's Mighty Mac, a double Faraday locomotive, and you know, there is a lot you could do with an engine like that. They could provide some muscle power for the Skarloey Railway, maybe help them out with goods work at the Blue Mountain Quarry. In their debut episode, we see them bickering over which way to go, and after getting stuck, realizing they have to work together as one engine to get by. So would I want them to return? Sure, as long as the Skarloey engines aren't constantly pushed to the side. The last of the newbies almost made it into the CGI series, believe it or not. Dennis probably had the strongest introduction out of the Series 9 newbies. He's lazy and manipulative, but in the end saw that it would get him nowhere if he kept acting this way. And in a show where we have an ungodly amount of Class 8 shunters, the Sovereign 11001 is a very unique design and almost seems to fit Audrey's mentality of including oddities on Sodor. So why not bring Dennis back? Well, interestingly, he was going to be brought back in Day of the Diesels alongside Splatter and Dodge, as was suggested by Ian McHugh, but Hit wanted new characters instead, as if Bell, Flynn, Den, and Dart weren't enough, so we got Paxton, Sidney, and Norman instead. Well, Paxton and Sidney did get starring roles in the Brenner era, and even a couple in Big World Big Adventures era. Norman was always in the background, and he's done nothing to draw me towards him. Funny how Dennis left more of an impact in one episode than Norman did in 10 seasons, isn't it? Also, this lyric comes off as incredibly ironic in hindsight.
Our new friends on the island here, once seen you won't forget.
Oh, older fans don't forget, but Thomas's owners somehow seem to. Some newbies from Series 9 through 11 were lucky to make it into CGI, while the rest sadly weren't, with Dennis coming painfully close. While Series 9 was being produced, Hit Entertainment put itself up for sale due to straining toy firms, and so they were bought up by the private equity investment group Apex Partners, which saved Hit from any potential downfall. Apex Partners would maintain ownership of the company until the airing of Series 16, to which they were bought up by Mattel, and the rest is pretty much history. Sharon Miller also made her writing debut in Series 9, and her writing overall for it was above average at best. Not outright awful, but at best, they were tolerable. That being said, she did set the bar for what we would later expect from her writing down the road up to Series 16. For this series, as well as 10 and 11, Sharon was the script editor before becoming head writer for Series 12 through 16. Sadly, her episodes and writing would ultimately earn her an extremely negative reputation among fans that has yet to fully heal, if at all. Is her writing for the later seasons deserving of the criticism it got? Well, we'll see when we get to each one. Even 8 years after her last written episode had aired, fans still insist on dogpiling all the blame on her and treating her like scum. Seriously, people.
It's time to stop! It's time to stop, okay?
Lest we forget, Sharon Miller is a human being like the rest of us. A show should not depend on one person in order for it to be amazing, nor should only one person get the entire blame for a movie, novel adaptation, or a few seasons of your favorite show being awful. Granted, there are some people who will do the research on what goes on behind the scenes, but then there's those who just won't bother doing any, and instead take their frustration out on one person online. And there are those who do their research, but still decide to blame one person online anyway, because why not? Can we stop doing that, folks? It's not going to make you any better than them. Two wrongs never make a right, you know. Now that I got that out of my system, what else can I talk about here? Well, Series 9 has a lot of firsts, yet another one under its belt is being the first to air on Milkshake from November 2006 to January 2007. Since then, the show has run every new season there since, being broadcast on weekdays from 6 a.m. to 9:15 a.m., though not without its own distribution problems throughout the Brenna era. Also, for the first time, the titles of the episodes were read out loud by the narrator. Not something that has a huge impact either way, but I wanted to mention it regardless. Something I didn't mention for Series 8, but I figured I'd do so here, is that every TV airing would feature Wilbert Audrey's letter to Christopher for the second Railway Series book, narrated by Nigel Plaskett, before the title sequence played, and following that was the Island of Sodor sequence before we got to the first episode of the day or week. The letter would be featured up to Series 12, while the opening Sodor sequence would be refilmed in high definition for Series 11, and then the close-up of Thomas refilmed for Series 12, and that also applies to the opening theme. The opening Sodor sequence was then redone by Nitrogen Studios for the CGI era up to Series 18 for the United States only. There was a recording of Ben Small saying, "Hello everybody, welcome to the Island of Sodor," but it was only ever featured in an interview with Veronica Chambers on the BBC in 2014. Starting with Series 9, the program would begin with Thomas's crew getting him ready for a busy day, and it was then followed up by Audrey's letter, the title sequence, and the Sodor opening sequence before finally getting to the first episode. After the engine roll call, the program would end with Thomas being cleaned by his crew after a busy day before the end credits played. While they didn't add much, it was nice to see some exclusive footage that didn't appear in any episode. Shame that they're hard to find these days, much less in widescreen. Another thing that I like to mention is the controversy surrounding Keeping Up with James, or rather, the UK DVD it was on, Little Engines, Big Days Out. In 2011, Hilary Fortnum, Wilbert Audrey's youngest daughter, criticized Hit Entertainment for the use of the term winter holidays instead of Christmas, and even said that her father would have hated the episode because of it, and not because of, I don't know, the awful writing style that was plaguing the show at the time. In an era where we had cargo being carried unrealistically, engines rhyming at the drop-ups of Topham's top hat, two engines with an unreasonably small load between them on a conflict, and not to mention the implications of firefighters acting like idiots. This episode specifically from 6 years prior was what got her all riled up. Unbelievable. That's all I can say to describe it. Unbelievable. Now granted, it did lead to Christmas being reinstated for Series 17 onward, but the DVD, which was a non-holiday release, let's not forget, had come out in 2006, 5 years ago. So why didn't Hillary call out Hit Entertainment back then? Maybe she just didn't know about it at the time? I don't know. This doesn't make any sense to me at all. I didn't see anything controversial about Keeping Up with James. On its own, it's a pretty harmless, inoffensive episode overall, which is more than what can be said about the likes of Thomas the New Engine or Skarloey the Brave. Overall, Series 9 was a step down from Series 8. Not a huge one, but still significant enough that it resulted in the show getting much more childish. Admittedly, I did enjoy it a lot when I was younger, but now I see that it's not aged very well. It's an average at best series, but unfortunately, it's about to get worse from there. Much worse.
We are Jonathan Trucks.